Imagine a world so ordinary that its people barely notice the ground beneath their feet. Now imagine that same ground being so crushingly dense, it could snap the bones of alien soldiers trained on 100 different worlds. Earth, our quiet blue marble, wasn't supposed to be special. But in the archives of the Galactic Confederacy, one misfiled document turned our planet into a legend no one even realized existed. It began with a clerical error, a simple box left unchecked in the Orion expansion log dated nearly 300 years ago. According to galactic records, Earth had already been evaluated, cataloged, and marked. Inhabited by unremarkable oxygen breathers. Case closed. No follow-up required. Of course, it was a lie, a bureaucratic accident buried under centuries of data audits, planetary revisions, and interstellar coffee breaks. And so, humanity was forgotten. Until one morning, on cycle 145.39 of the Confederacy calendar, a name appeared on an automated audit list. Sol 3 Unverified Biological Status Captain Yilnek of the 4th Exploration Fleet received the assignment. It was supposed to be a routine assessment, verify atmospheric safety, measure surface gravity, and submit a compliance report. The crew joked that it was the perfect low-risk mission, a chance to earn hazard pay without actual hazards. They had no idea how wrong they were. The survey vessel CNS Kalara entered Earth's orbit on what humans call a Wednesday morning. From above, the planet looked calm, swirls of white cloud and blue ocean, a tranquil marble in the void. Inside the ship, the mood was equally relaxed. Commander Thralin, the mission's science officer, laughed as he recalibrated his gravity stabilizers. Primitive species, mild climate, standard atmospheric composition. We'll be back by lunch, he said. Captain Yilnek nodded. Let's make this quick. Record everything. I want full biometrics and a local intelligence sweep before shift rotation. The landing pod detached, descending toward the North American continent, a small suburban area marked by green fields, roads, and the occasional elderly human walking a dog. Everything seemed fine until they touched down. Private Selnor, their lead security officer, was the first to step onto Earth's surface. For precisely 0.4 seconds, everything was normal. Then his knees buckled, his exosuit alarms blared, and before anyone could react, he collapsed, his legs bending in directions they were never meant to. The crew screamed over the comms. What happened? Environmental toxins? Hostile attack? Captain Yilnek. Scanners returned the answer in bold red text. Gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared. That number meant nothing to the humans nearby. But to the Confederacy, it was lethal. Their worlds averaged 4.2. No species had evolved beyond 5. To them, Earth's gravity was a double-strength death field. Within seconds, the medic, Dr. Velra, rushed to help. The moment her boots touched the soil, crack! Her femur snapped like dry coral. Her medical bag hit the ground, scattering nanobandages and sensors across the lawn. Captain Yilnek's eyes widened as he checked the live vitals. 2 soldiers down. No toxins, no weapons, no enemy fire, just gravity. Meanwhile, a nearby human, Patricia Thornwood, age 63, was walking her golden retriever, Daisy. She glanced at the commotion in her neighbor's yard, a few shiny metallic figures twitching on the grass. Teenagers with cosplay again, she muttered and kept walking. To the aliens, however, she was an impossible entity. She walked under crushing gravitational pressure as if it were nothing. Her dog trotted beside her, 4-legged biological marvel with effortless bone density. Yilnek whispered into his calm voice, trembling. Record everything. We are witnessing a Type Delta superspecies. They're unfazed by a gravity field twice the lethal limit. For 3 centuries, humanity had been forgotten, lost between the data folds of the Confederacy's vast bureaucracy. Now, rediscovered, it wasn't our technology that shocked them, not our intelligence, or our weapons, or our history. It was our biology, our bones, our muscles, our evolution, sculpted by the relentless pull of Earth itself. Where they saw a hostile environment, we saw home. Where their bones shattered, ours adapted. And suddenly, The most ordinary creatures in the galaxy were anything but. As Yilnek's crippled team scrambled back to orbit, the captain sent a final transmission to Central Command. Subject species exhibit extreme physical resilience. Recommend immediate re-evaluation of Sol 3 classification and emergency medical support. He hesitated before sending the next line. Also, advise, do not attempt physical contact. These beings are terrifyingly durable. The message would trigger the greatest panic in Confederacy history, but that is where the real story begins. Because when the galaxy finally turned its eyes toward Earth, they didn't see a fragile, primitive civilization. They saw a nightmare wrapped in denim and coffee cups, a world where gravity itself forged its children into unintentional gods. And humanity had absolutely no idea. The message from Captain Yilnek traveled 72 light minutes before reaching the galactic relay. In that time, two things happened aboard his ship. First, the crew's medical officer fainted again, her bone regenerator overloaded. And second, every single human nearby went on with their day, completely unaware that they'd just caused an interstellar health crisis. On the Confederacy's homeworld, the transmission was received by Admiral Selvorin, head of the Planetary Evaluation Bureau. He expected another dull report about some swamp planet filled with harmless microbes. Instead, he read the first line. Surface gravity at lethal threshold. 2 officers down, local inhabitants unaffected. He blinked, read it again, then again. Unaffected? He opened the attached feed, grainy footage from the ship's external cameras. There, clear as daylight, was an elderly bipedal creature walking calmly beneath a crushing gravity field, pulling behind her a smaller quadrupedal organism that looked suspiciously happy. The Admiral's tentacles twitched nervously. He called for the Biophysics Council. Within minutes, a dozen alien scientists crowded the room, their eyes fixed on the footage. She's not wearing a pressure suit. No mechanical supports either. And she's smiling, under a gravity load that would liquefy our internal organs. The room fell silent. Then the Admiral whispered, "We've found a death world, inhabited by super soldiers." Within hours, the Confederacy launched a full-scale emergency review. Planets were reclassified, protocols rewritten, and new advisory levels added to the Galactic Hazard Index. Class 12, Biohazard. Class 13, Radiation. Class 14, Earth. They even gave it a nickname, the planet that trains gods. News spread faster than any official could contain it. Across the stars, social networks exploded. Hashtags like #HumanSariReal and #GravityMonsters trended in over 9 languages. Military analysts debated whether Earthlings were peaceful or simply unaware of their destructive potential. Meanwhile, aboard the Kalara, Captain Yilnek was fighting to stay calm. His 2 injured crew members were in stasis pods, their bones regenerating painfully. Sensors still displayed abnormal readings: gravitational density, magnetic interference, oxygen toxicity, all marked tolerated by natives. He recorded a voice log. The locals seem entirely immune. They carry heavy objects casually. They even run, jump, and wrestle. Their skeletal density is nearly double ours. Their musculature reads like military augmentation. He paused, glancing at a monitor showing Patricia Thornwood again, now feeding her dog a biscuit. I believe she is their leader. The galactic record would later mark this as the single greatest misinterpretation in First Contact history. In the grand halls of the Confederacy capital, chaos reigned. Ambassadors from 30 systems demanded answers. Why had Earth gone unlisted? Who authorized its emission? And more importantly, were these humans planning to expand beyond their world? A pale, nervous clerk from the Orion archives stood before them, clutching a trembling datapad. It appears, Honorable Council, that Earth's classification form was misplaced under the folder for terrestrial rodents. The chamber erupted in outrage. Rodents? You lost an entire species under rodents? We must send reinforcements. Reinforcements? Against a species that walks under double gravity? Are you MAD? The debate grew louder. Finally, the High Chancellor struck his staff on the floor. Enough! We must observe them directly. If they are as powerful as reports claim, we need diplomacy, not conflict. And so, the First Contact Task Force was authorized. An elite delegation of scientists, diplomats, and bioengineers was sent to Earth with one goal: understand how these creatures survive what should be impossible. Back on the planet, humanity continued blissfully ignorant of the galactic meltdown. The aliens' stealth probes began scanning cities, parks, and gyms, returning data that made no sense. In every human sample, bone density averaged 2.2 times the galactic norm. Muscle fiber resilience was off the charts. Even human children could lift loads that would rupture an alien's spine. But the strangest part wasn't their strength. It was their adaptability. Humans didn't just survive Earth. They thrived in it. They built civilizations, climbed mountains, dove into pressure-filled oceans, and sent their fragile metal ships into space, all while complaining about Mondays. To the Confederacy's analysts, it was horrifying. These beings lived in constant physical stress, their worlds pull on their bones a daily assault. Yet they smiled, they sang, they made art, they even danced under the weight of their deadly gravity. Dr. Velra, now partially recovered, tried to make sense of it in her log. They treat pain as exercise. They expose themselves to heat, cold, and pressure intentionally. They even compete to see who can lift more weight for fun. One observer summarized it perfectly. If Earth were our homeworld, our species would have gone extinct before developing tools. Captain Yilnek, reviewing these findings, realized the Confederacy had underestimated something far deeper than biology. Humanity wasn't strong in spite of its world. It was strong because of it. Earth, in its silent orbit around the sun, had done what no other planet dared. It taught its children to defy gravity itself. And while humans looked at the stars and dreamed of reaching them, the stars had begun to look back and whisper, how did they survive this long? In the weeks that followed, the Confederacy would struggle with a terrifying new reality. If one human, one Patricia Thornwood, could casually break their soldiers, what would an entire planet of them do if provoked? The panic was only just beginning. But before fear turned to war, came curiosity. Because for the first time in recorded galactic history, an alien civilization realized that the most powerful species in the galaxy wasn't out there. It was right here, walking its dog and sipping tea. For centuries, humanity wondered if we were alone. As it turned out, the galaxy had known about us, they just didn't remember. Now, with the rediscovery of Earth, that mistake had turned into obsession. The Confederacy's brightest minds, biologists, physicists, evolutionary engineers, all turned their gaze toward one question. How can something survive under gravity that crushes our machines? In orbit around Earth, the orbital research array Virela began its deep scan experiments. Every human movement was tracked, every heartbeat measured, every step analyzed. And what they found defied everything the Confederacy thought it understood about life. Human bone wasn't just strong, it was dense to the molecular core. Its lattice structure compressed under stress, then rebounded like engineered metal. In some cases, it even grew stronger after injury. To the scientists, this was a biological impossibility. To the humans, it was just healing. Their muscles carried an oxygen capacity far beyond Confederacy norms. Their hearts, primitive single-chambered pumps, were so absurdly overbuilt that even in microgravity they didn't collapse. Dr. Velra wrote in her log, "They appear to have evolved for punishment." But it wasn't just the physiology that puzzled them. It was their psychology. Humans willingly increased their own suffering for sport. They lifted heavy things, they ran long distances, voluntarily exhausting themselves. They jumped into freezing water for fun. They exposed themselves to radiation just to get a better tan. And when one of them broke a bone, they didn't retreat to a stasis pod. They laughed. They told stories. They said, "It'll heal." Dr. Velra noted, "I've never studied a species that treats trauma as recreation. In one observation, they watched a human child trip, fall, and scrape a knee. The alien scientists panicked, preparing to record the death of a juvenile specimen. 30 seconds later, the child stood up, wiped the blood off, and kept playing. The lab went silent. Then one of the researchers whispered, "They don't even stop moving when damaged." That line became a meme across the galactic network. Billions repeated it with awe and fear. They don't even stop moving when damaged. Soon the Confederacy began comparative testing. They recreated simulated gravity chambers, adjusting the pull from one Earth G to lower levels. When they introduced other alien volunteers, their bones held fine at 4.5, strained at 6, snapped at 7. At 9.8, no alien lasted more than a second. Then they watched archived human footage, people running marathons, climbing mountains, swimming deep oceans. And in every video, one conclusion emerged. Humans weren't fragile explorers. They were apex survivors. The Council issued a new term, gravital superresilience, a biological classification reserved for species whose evolutionary adaptation exceeds known galactic safety limits. Only one species had ever met the criteria, humans. But as the data poured in, so did confusion. How could such resilience evolve without technology, without genetic engineering, without external guidance? Captain Yilnek began to suspect the unthinkable. He stared at Earth's glowing curve through the viewport, recording a private note. Perhaps the planet itself forged them this way. The humans call it gravity, but it behaves less like a force and more like a teacher. He looked down at his own trembling hands, the faint ache in his limbs from his brief time on the surface. I felt its pull. It wanted to keep me there, to make me heavier, slower, stronger. Maybe this world doesn't destroy its children, it shapes them. The more they studied humans, the stranger the picture became. Every part of human life, pain, endurance, emotion, seemed tied to this invisible force. They carried the memory of gravity in everything they did. When they lost loved ones, they said, "I feel heavy." When they mourned, they broke down. Even their language was filled with the physics of their existence. To the aliens, this wasn't poetry. It was evolution speaking through metaphor. Dr. Velra summarized, "They have learned to live with weight, physical, emotional, existential." Perhaps that is their secret. One particularly bold scientist, Dr. Krell, insisted on a live experiment. He volunteered to visit Earth again, this time wearing a triple reinforced exosuit. He lasted 2 minutes before blacking out. When he awoke aboard the ship, he simply said, "I sneezed, and 3 ribs dislocated." The report added a new galactic warning. Avoid visiting Sol 3 without adaptive exoskeleton. Side effects include unconsciousness, bone liquefaction, and existential dread. But the more terrified the galaxy became, the more fascinated they grew. Because humanity's strength wasn't just biological. It was behavioral. They didn't merely endure their harsh environment. They improved it. They built towers that defied their own gravity. They flew machines into the skies that should have kept them grounded. They reached for the stars, even when the stars didn't know they existed. And perhaps the most terrifying revelation of all was that humans weren't trying to be strong. They simply were. Every breath, every step, every heartbeat, a lifetime of training against the constant drag of their homeworld. The aliens began to understand. Earth didn't make humans powerful by chance. It had spent 4 billion years crafting them for survival. One scientist's report would become legendary. To live on Earth is to wrestle with the universe every second of your life, and smile while doing it. When that line reached the Galactic Council, it silenced the room. No warship, no weapon, no fleet, just a species that existed under endless resistance, and called it life. And as that realization spread, so did something else, respect. Because somewhere between fear and fascination, the galaxy began to see humans not as monsters, but as miracles. Captain Yilnek wrote one final note in his journal before transmitting his findings. If gravity is a god, then these creatures are its chosen. They carry the burden of their world, and they do it laughing. The report was sent. The council convened. And across the stars, a quiet question began to echo. What happens if these beings ever decide to leave that world? That question would soon shake the foundations of the Confederacy itself. The transmission from Captain Yilnek's ship was supposed to be routine, a field report, a simple biological assessment. But by the time it reached the Galactic Council, it had already caused chaos. Within hours, encrypted copies were circulating through every major scientific hub in the Confederacy. Within days, it reached the military, and within a week, it reached the public. The Confederacy had encountered predatory species before. They had fought wars, survived plagues, faced extinction-level threats. But this was different. These creatures weren't predators. They were people. People who just happened to live in a world designed to crush everything weaker than themselves. They didn't hunt. They gardened. They didn't invade. They dreamed. They didn't conquer. They built. And yet, by galactic standards, they were living weapons, forged in silence, perfected by gravity. The first emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on Vornaxis Prime. 100 species gathered under the great crystalline dome, bioluminescent forms shimmering, translators humming, tempers rising. The central hologram flickered to life, a three-dimensional scan of the human skeleton. Counselor Muir of the Centauri leaned forward. They are carbon-based? Dr. Velra nodded. Yes, but their carbon density exceeds safety limits. They could operate machinery designed for exosuits without assistance. Another delegate muttered, if they ever left that planet. The chamber fell silent. No one finished the sentence. It wasn't long before the first proposals surfaced. The Department of Xenobiological Security suggested immediate planetary quarantine. No contact, no trade, no technology exchange. Others demanded the opposite. Initiate contact quickly, peacefully, before humanity advanced on its own. And then came the extremists, those who believed the only safe human was a distant one. Admiral Kraith of the Ulan Empire said bluntly, "We discovered a Death World species that doesn't know it's a Death World species. If they ever achieve interstellar flight, they won't need weapons. They are the weapons." But not everyone agreed. Some saw hope, a mirror of what the galaxy had lost. Counselor Velra countered, "Perhaps we fear them because they remind us of what we used to be, curious, reckless, alive." Her words lingered in the air like oxygen, dangerous, essential. Because beneath all the analysis and panic, something deeper was spreading. Admiration. Across the networks, human footage went viral. Clips of athletes running marathons under double gravity. Old videos of construction workers balancing steel beams at dizzying heights. An elderly woman named Patricia walking her dog, unknowingly terrifying an entire galaxy. They called her the Grave Mother. Fan art spread. Memes flooded the star net. The Confederacy couldn't decide whether to fear humanity or worship it. Meanwhile, the military didn't wait for philosophy. They began simulations. They calculated the potential impact of a human strike force, not armed, but simply existing on alien soil. A human soldier weighing 90 kilograms on Earth would crush the terrain of most Confederacy worlds like a siege tank. When asked for an official statement, a defense analyst said simply, "If they ever set foot on our worlds, we'll need reinforced floors." Even the engineers joined the paranoia. New designs were proposed. Anti-gravity containment chambers, reinforced diplomatic platforms, exoskeletal pressure suits, all designed not for humans' protection but for everyone else's. But amid all this fear, Captain Yilnek remained silent. He had seen the humans up close. He had watched a child fall and laugh. He had felt the pull of their world, the strange comfort in its relentless gravity. He sent one final message to the Council before resigning from active duty. We are frightened because they are strong, but perhaps they are strong because they are frightened. Their world never gave them rest, so they learned to live without it. The Council debated for months. Treaties were drafted, rejected, rewritten. Scientists proposed contact protocols, politicians proposed defense measures. And yet, despite all their fear, no human ever reached out. From their blue and white world, humanity continued exactly as it always had, unaware that billions of eyes were watching from the stars, debating whether they were gods or monsters. Then one day, Earth transmitted something unexpected, a signal, simple, rhythmic, almost ancient, a sequence of numbers and tones. The aliens panicked. The code was cracked within minutes. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a declaration. It was music, a recording of a human orchestra playing something called Ode to Joy. The council stared in silence as the melody filled the chamber, a species from a crushing world singing about unity, hope, and peace. For the first time in galactic history, no one spoke. The sound was both terrifying and beautiful, as if the universe itself were listening. And in that silence, a realization took root. Maybe humanity wasn't coming to conquer. Maybe they were coming to belong. Captain Yilnek's last words echoed through the archives. If they ever leave that world, may the galaxy be ready, not to fight them, but to meet them. The galaxy had spent months debating whether humanity was a miracle or a mistake. They feared their strength. They admired their will. And in their confusion, one decision emerged. They needed to meet them. For the first time in recorded galactic history, an invitation was sent to Earth. The message was short, elegant, universal. It said, "We see you. We wish to talk." The world governments argued. Scientists panicked. Media exploded. But while politicians hesitated, a 63-year-old retired schoolteacher named Patricia Thornwood became a symbol. She hadn't trained for this. She hadn't worn a uniform. She had simply lived under the weight of Earth her entire life. And so, when the invitation to the Galactic Summit came, humanity sent her. She left Earth quietly. No army, no weapons, just a single woman, a translator device, and gravity in her bones. The Confederacy's flagship, the Aurus Concord, hung like a star in orbit. Inside its crystalline halls, 1,000 alien eyes turned toward the human who had unknowingly terrified them all. She stepped off the ramp slowly, carefully. The reinforced platform groaned beneath her weight, and somewhere in the crowd someone whispered the phrase that had spread across the stars. "They don't even stop moving when damaged." Captain Yilnek was waiting. His posture was ceremonial, but his hands trembled slightly. He approached her with the reverence of someone meeting a myth. Patricia tilted her head and smiled, a small, warm, human smile. No threat, no arrogance, just presence. He looked at her and said, "Your species terrifies us and inspires us." Patricia blinked and replied softly, "We're just people." For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then Yilnek whispered, "Yes." And that is exactly why the debate that had once been filled with fear now felt different. The human wasn't a storm. She wasn't a weapon. She was ordinary. And yet, she carried the weight of a world that would break them all. She stood in the center of the summit. No podium, no prepared speech, just a woman and the echo of her footsteps. She spoke. "You've spent months analyzing our bones, measuring our gravity, fearing what we might become. But we never thought of ourselves that way. We just learned to live with what we were born into." The chamber was silent. Then she continued, "For us, strength isn't something special. It's survival. It's picking yourself up every time the world pulls you down. And it always pulls you down." As her words translated across 1,000 frequencies, something shifted. The fear began to dissolve, replaced by something far more powerful. Respect. Yilnek raised his gaze and said, "Maybe being born on a high-gravity world was never a curse. It was preparation." Because they finally understood humanity hadn't been training for WAR. They had been training for existence. The summit ended not with treaties or declarations, but with a moment of silence. A moment in which an entire galaxy recognized a truth older than any empire. That strength isn't in weapons or power. It's in endurance. And endurance had a face now. A soft, wrinkled human face with kind eyes and steel in her bones. The galaxy had feared monsters. They found gardeners. They expected conquerors. They found survivors. In their fear, they saw strength. In that strength, they saw hope. Because if a species could learn to thrive under gravity that crushes everything else, then maybe they were exactly what the stars needed. Patricia stood at the viewport of the Auris Concord. Below her, Earth shone, blue, fragile, radiant. Yilnek joined her. For the first time, neither spoke as soldier or emissary. Just two living beings staring at the same sky. Patricia whispered, "Funny. We always thought we were small." And Yilnek replied, "And yet, the galaxy is trembling because of you." She smiled softly. "Then maybe it's time we stop hiding under our own sky." In the years that followed, they would call it the Day of Wait, the day humanity stood not as conquerors, but as equals. The day gravity, once their invisible burden, became their greatest strength. The galaxy opened its gates, and humanity, forged in P and PAIN, stepped forward with the quiet grace of giants. Because in the end, it wasn't their bones that made them extraordinary. It was their spirit. The spirit that never stopped walking no matter how heavy the world became. Maybe we were never meant to escape gravity. Maybe we were meant to carry it with us. To remind the stars what it means to endure.